yourself, Ken, I read incessantly as a boy. I mean, by the time I was in my 20s, I must have read 3,000 books. Really an amazing amount of books. But my first fiction fandom was in 1958 at the Alexandria Hotel. Robert Bloch was the master of ceremonies. Richard Matheson was the guest of honor. Charles Beaumont was auctioned off, I think, for $20 to have lunch with. And then is when I started to see sort of Spanish tradition at work. I went to a room where everybody from Ross Rocklin to Paul Anderson, A.E. Van Vogt. I mean, the names would stagger you. I made a list of them once, and it was about 12 really, really big name science fiction writers or fans, people who really were movers and shakers, like Lester Del Rey, for example. And here was me, sitting there on the floor, a guest of Charles Beaumont, surrounded by the giants of science fiction, people that I had read and who had edited and published things. Leo Margulies there with about 44 titles of just westerns alone that he had edited and published or whatever. So for me, that was like a baptism into a huge, huge family. And I saw, like you did, Shell, the tradition of it all. When people would come to the Comic-Con, one thing they could guarantee was that the biggest name fan who had come the longest way, who was the least sung, the unsung fan, would be on your elbow with his wife and his family. He'd be handled around. This is Jack Kirby. Oh my God, yes, you know, here's Will Eisner. Oh yes, yes. And you would do that, and people would get to meet Milton Caniff. I met Milton Caniff because you worked with him and for him. You know, like, Roy, look at your room here. This astonishing amount of care, detail, attention, money, and wisdom that goes into putting together a collection of science fiction, which is the literature of the age. I mean, anyone who thinks for a moment realizes that we have really reached critical mass and that the world has become science fiction. That there's hardly a thing that you and I can dreamed about, talked about, like this idea of a rover running around on Mars, checking things out, sniffing the rocks and instantly knowing their composition, being able to relate information back and forth across 300 million plus miles, and it coming in like this, syncing information, people cheering, totally relaxed. Those people couldn't have done that if there had not been all of this attention to speculative fiction, and to be sort of involved in the church of science fiction, because that's what I think of as fandom, is the church of science fiction fandom. I think that a lot of people come to it with that kind of a reverence. They spend really good money to get an autograph, or to get a photograph, or to get a picture, or to get a book, or a magazine, or a poster. They take it home and they treasure it for a lifetime. They show it to their friends when they come in the house. That's Robert Heinlein's signature. God, are you serious? That's Robert Heinlein? Yes, that's Robert Heinlein. And like me, I proudly boast of the people I know. I know Robert Bloch. I know Ray Bradbury. I know A.E. Van Vogt. You know, A.E. Van Vogt and I know things that other people do not know. It's like, well, let's keep it a little thing between us, man, you know, kind of things. Where I looked at this, like, using that name, A.E. Van Vogt, in my opinion, is the greatest living science fiction writer. Can you understand the idea of that? We're talking about an art form that's only about 50 years old. Forey Ackerman's been part of it since the dawn of time. He's got the first Hugo, he won the first this, the first that, the first this. He belonged to every first club that ever was. He donated money for the very chairs that at first made up the furniture for the Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society, the Los Fos. He's the one, well, to know Forrest J. Ackerman. I know Forey very well. I put on a couple of conventions where he was my guest of honor, and I got really, really, really noble folks to come and play fans with us. People like Jack Kirby. Why? Because it was for Forrest J. Ackerman, and they could take out a very busy weekend out of their schedule to come and host, people of this ilk. So these kind of people for me have been my admirers, my friends. Look, I wrote this book, Twilight Zone, Scripts and Stories. And these are the stories that I wrote expressly for that dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. And I want to show you something. As a beginning writer, this is written out here, my teachers were Rod Serling and Ray Bradbury. My teachers were Theodore Sturgeon and Jerry Soule. My teachers were Charles Beaumont and Richard Matheson. My teachers were William F. Nolan and Robert Bloch. Those are big names. These gifted men wrote imaginative short stories whose collective subject was the human condition. Their protagonist was every man. Their method was realism with an added touch of strange. Through their storytelling art, they could, with minimal setting and a couple of characters, conjure forth an entire world. Through studying these writers, I learned that if I hoped to earn a living, I must build my career on a tripod of skills. I must not only prove myself able to write fiction, but must also be prepared to write telling articles, introductions, and other forms of nonfiction for books and magazines, and in addition must know how to write drama in the form of TV and film scripts. I learned that the successful writer is one who can work in all three forms and therefore can retain his independence, knowing that if one market for his work should become closed to him, he can find another market that is open and thus continue to remain in the public eye while waiting for the mud to clear and his virtues to be recognized. Learning to write outlines and scripts for dramatic programs requires that the dramatist must learn to show everything in a few compressed, brief scenes and not simply tell it, and that his product be formed to meet a specific format. Although the script appears to be a blueprint, it is also a sales document and a literary exercise of a very high order, demanding an intensely expressive use of language designed to lead the careful reader, the producer, to create in his own mind a vivid depiction, very like the TV show itself, although as yet uncast and yet to be filmed, a TV show on paper that can be experienced again and again with each reading. The purpose of these writings is not to convince the reason, but to attract and lay hold of the reader's imagination. He must come to believe it before he will buy it. Because of countless reruns, Rod Serling's remarkable television series, The Twilight Zone, has entered into millions of homes over the years since it was first telecast. And then there's some pitch for the book here. But the basic thing that I was trying to get at is here are 8 men who recognized that my desire was so fierce that I would suffer no discouragement, that there was no way that they could make me stop wanting to do this and believing that it was possible. And the reason I believed it was possible was because of Ray Bradbury. At the age of 14, he was selling short stories, selling newspapers at the corner of, I think, 9th and Olympic in Los Angeles, holding out the papers and taking the quarters or whatever they were, every evening after school, and then going home from that to a typewriter and typing out these first few short stories of his, and he had sold a story before he was 21 years old. I was trying to do it when I was about 25 years old. Now, the difference between me and Ray, I could see that. I could see, well, I've read a lot. I know what's good. I know what I like. I know who's doing good work. I should just be able to copy what they're doing and learn to sort of be a forger and forge their styles if necessary, and I will sell the story to these magazines. I want to sell one to the magazine of fantasy and science fiction so bad. I finally did. But for many, many years there, after being encouraged to be a writer and meeting and hanging out with these guys, I spent like 5 years digging dry wells, and no money would come forth. And right along with me was my wife, Lola Clayton Johnson, Lola Joan Johnson. We've been together for 44 years. When I decided I wanted to try to do this, she didn't say, oh, I don't think it could be possible. She knew I'd done a number of other really startling things in a very short time, and that I was a real quick study, and she knew I really, really, really wanted it. But how could we survive a thing like that? And yet, she said, go for it. She worked in a nursery school, earning painfully low amounts of money to be able just to keep things going. There were many a time the house payments were delinquent, and electricity's been shut off any number of times. And, I have been really broke. I don't think in my life I've ever been poor. Hell of a difference between broke and poor. And we were never poor. Our family was always clean, very well fed. The house was always spotless. It always welcomed anyone who was my friend, was welcome in the door, became instantly Lola's friend. It's a two-man job. It takes two to hold up the sky. One person's the inside man, one guy's the outside man. It's enough for me to take care of all of the papers in my office. and the rejection slips and the checks and the agents and all that goes with that job. Why should I worry about the income tax? Why should I worry about the house payment? Why should I worry about the when is the light payment due? When is the this due? When is that due? No, she tells me, your son's birthday is coming up in 2 weeks. Thank you. That's all I need to know. Now I'm reprogrammed. I don't have to memorize anything. My head can be innocent of everything except my maddest conceptions and dreams. And I found out that you can sell almost any idea, and that you can use almost any dialogue if you put it in the mouth of the right person. Oftentimes, I will write down a line of dialogue I know goes in this play, and I'll keep moving that line of dialogue from character to character until it fits.